What if I told you that most conflicts don't begin with what's said, but with how it's said? That every argument, every broken relationship, every war, personal or global, could have been avoided with a different choice of words. It sounds dramatic, but words are weapons, and most of us wield them without realizing the damage they cause. Some cut sharply with accusations, others bludgeon with blame, and the worst, they're laced with poison. Subtle jabs, passive aggression, a quiet contempt hiding beneath polite tones. And yet, no one ever teaches us how to speak without harm. We're trained to be persuasive, to debate, to win. But what if communication wasn't about winning? What if it was about understanding? Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication is a book that at first seems almost naive in its premise. The idea that we can transform our relationships, personal, professional, even political, just by changing our language? It feels too simple, too optimistic. But then, as you read, something unsettling happens. You start seeing the ways we sabotage conversations without even meaning to. The guilt-tripping parent, the dismissive boss, the well-intentioned friend whose helpful advice feels more like an attack. And then, the hardest part, you start seeing yourself. You remember the times you've said, "You never listened to me," instead of, "I feel unheard." The times you've blurted, "You're so selfish," when what you really meant was, "I need more support." And suddenly it clicks. The reason so many conversations end in frustration isn't because people don't care. It's because they don't know how to say what they truly mean. So what if we could? What if we could learn to speak in a way that dissolves defensiveness instead of triggering it? That turns conflict into cooperation? That makes people not just hear us, but actually want to understand us? Because that's what nonviolent communication teaches. Not just how to talk, but how to connect. And today, we're going to break it down, step by step. Words are more than just sounds. They shape our reality. They determine whether a conversation builds a bridge or burns one. Yet most of us have never been taught how to use language in a way that actually fosters connection. We assume that as long as we're not outright yelling or throwing insults, we're communicating peacefully. But nonviolent communication goes far beyond simply avoiding conflict. It's about transforming the way we express ourselves so that we're actually heard, and the way we listen so that others feel truly understood. At its core, nonviolent communication is built on a radical yet simple idea. Underneath every argument, every frustration, every passive-aggressive remark, there is an unspoken need. And when those needs go unacknowledged, we lash out in ways that only push people further away. The beauty of nonviolent communication is that it gives us a framework to stop this cycle before it even starts. Instead of reacting on autopilot, judging, blaming, assuming, we break communication down into 4 essential components. First, observations versus evaluations. The ability to separate what actually happened from the story we tell ourselves about it. You didn't just ignore my text. You responded 5 hours later. That's the fact. The judgment is you don't care about me. See the difference? One opens the door for clarity, the other for conflict. Next, feelings versus thoughts. Learning to express our emotions without disguising them as accusations. I feel disrespected isn't actually a feeling, it's an interpretation. I feel frustrated or I feel unimportant. That's what's real. The moment we start speaking in genuine feelings rather than veiled blame, conversations shift. Then comes needs versus strategies. Because beneath every emotional reaction is a core human need: autonomy, respect, security, connection. The real reason behind your frustration isn't that your partner forgot to take out the trash, it's that you need more shared responsibility. But when we argue over surface-level things, we never actually get to the root of the problem. Finally, requests versus demands. The art of asking for what we need in a way that invites cooperation rather than forcing compliance. "Can you please lower your voice?" sounds very different from "you need to stop being so loud." One invites change, the other provokes defensiveness. These 4 components seem simple, almost obvious, but here's the catch. Most of us fail at them constantly. Because when emotions run high, logic takes a back seat. We go on the attack. We defend ourselves. We assume the worst. But what if, instead of reacting, we slowed down? What if we trained ourselves to respond differently? Because that's what nonviolent communication is. A method of speaking, yes, but more importantly, a way of thinking. And in the next section, we'll break down exactly how to apply these principles in real-world conversations. Most of us don't realize it, but the way we speak is often the reason we aren't heard. We think we're stating facts when in reality, we're making judgments. We think we're describing reality when in truth, we're layering it with opinions, assumptions, and biases. And here's the problem. When people feel judged, they stop listening. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague shows up late. You turn to them and say, "You're so unprofessional." What happens next? Most likely, they get defensive. Maybe they argue, maybe they shut down, maybe they fire back with an excuse. Either way, the conversation just became a battlefield. Now let's try something different. Instead of evaluating their behavior, simply observe it. I noticed that you arrived 20 minutes after our scheduled start time. That's a statement of fact. There's no judgment, no assumption, no emotional charge, just reality as it is. And here's the magic. When we strip away judgment, we create space for an actual conversation. But let's take this deeper. Why do we evaluate in the first place? Why do we say things like, "You're lazy," instead of, "I noticed you haven't finished the project"? Or, "You never appreciate me," instead of, "I didn't hear a thank you after I made dinner"? The answer is simple. Evaluations are easier. They're shortcuts. When we say someone is lazy, we don't have to think about the real issue, that maybe they're overwhelmed, unmotivated, or struggling with something we don't see. When we accuse someone of not appreciating us, we don't have to reveal our own vulnerability, that maybe we just want to feel valued. But evaluations come at a cost. They turn conversations into courtrooms where one person plays the judge and the other the defendant, and no one likes being on trial. Now let's look at a real-world example. A parent tells their teenager, "You're irresponsible, you never clean your room." The teen, predictably, rolls their eyes and shuts the door. But what if the parent said, "I noticed your room hasn't been cleaned in the past week. I'd really like to understand what's going on"? It's the same situation, but an entirely different outcome. One approach fuels resistance, the other invites a conversation. And that's the power of separating observation from evaluation. It turns blame into curiosity, conflict into dialogue. So here's the challenge. The next time you catch yourself making a judgment, pause. Ask yourself, am I stating a fact or am I adding my own interpretation? And then try saying only what you see. Because when you change the way you observe, you change the way people respond. Think about the last time you were frustrated with someone. Maybe a friend canceled plans, a coworker ignored your email, or your partner dismissed something important to you. How did you express it? Did you say, "You make me so angry"? Or maybe, "You don't even care about me"? Now let's break this down. What's actually happening in these statements? They don't describe feelings. They describe thoughts, interpretations of the other person's behavior. And that's where things go wrong. Here's the core mistake. When we confuse thoughts with feelings, we shift responsibility for our emotions onto someone else. Instead of owning our experience, we hand over control, making the other person the villain in our emotional story. And when people feel blamed, what do? They defend, deny, or disengage. The conversation stops being about connection and turns into a battle over who's right. But let's reframe this. What if, instead of saying, "You make me feel ignored," we said, "I feel hurt because I really wanted to hear your thoughts on this"? Or instead of, "You don't appreciate me," we said, "I feel unappreciated because I put a lot of effort into this"? See the shift? Instead of accusing, we reveal. Instead of blaming, we invite understanding. This is what nonviolent communication teaches, not just how to speak, but how to be emotionally honest in a way that others can actually hear. Let's bring this into a real-world situation. Imagine you're in a relationship, and your partner has been spending a lot of time on their phone while you're talking. Most people would react with something like, "You don't even listen to me anymore." That's an attack. And what happens next? Your partner rolls their eyes, gets defensive, or fires back with, "I do listen, you're always complaining." Now let's reframe it using true feelings. I feel disconnected when I'm talking and I see you on your phone. I really value our conversations and want to feel like we're present with each other. What's the difference? The first approach triggers resistance. The second creates space for empathy. No accusations, no assumptions, just a genuine expression of emotion. And here's the powerful truth. People don't argue with feelings. They argue with judgments. The moment you shift from "you never care" to "I feel unimportant," the conversation stops being a debate and starts being a dialogue. So the next time you're frustrated, pause. Ask yourself, am I expressing a feeling or am I disguising a judgment as an emotion? Because when you communicate your true feelings, something incredible happens. People actually listen. Most conflicts aren't about what they seem to be about. The argument over who does the dishes isn't really about dishes. The fight about spending too much time at work isn't really about work. The tension over your partner not texting back fast enough isn't about their response time. These are just strategies, ways we try to meet deeper needs without realizing it. And when we confuse the two, we end up in endless cycles of frustration, arguing over surface-level issues while completely missing the real problem. Let's break it down. A need is something fundamental: security, connection, respect, autonomy, appreciation. A strategy is how we try to meet that need, asking for help, setting boundaries, making requests, or, when we're not aware, complaining, criticizing, or controlling. Here's a classic example. A husband and wife are constantly fighting because the husband works late. The wife says, "You never spend time with me." The husband says, "I'm working hard to provide for us." They're locked in a battle of strategies. But if we strip it down to the needs, the wife isn't just complaining about time. She has an unmet need for connection. The husband isn't just defending his work, he has a need for purpose and contribution. Neither is wrong, but because they're arguing over how instead of why, they get stuck. Now imagine if the conversation shifted. Instead of "you never spend time with me," the wife says, "I feel lonely and I really need more quality time with you." And instead of "I work hard for us, stop nagging me," the husband says, "Providing for our future is really important to me, and I also want to make sure we stay connected." Now, instead of fighting over the strategy, they're talking about the need. And once the need is clear, they can actually find a solution. Maybe scheduling dedicated time together without resentment, maybe discussing workload balance. The strategy can shift, but the need remains. This plays out in every part of life. A child throwing a tantrum isn't just being difficult, they might have an unmet need for autonomy. A boss micromanaging your every move isn't just being controlling, they might have a deep need for certainty. Even the person who constantly interrupts in conversations might not be rude. They might have an unmet need for significance, for feeling heard. The key is to look past the behavior and ask, what's the real need underneath this? And here's the most important part. When you make a request, make sure it's about your need, not just your preferred strategy. Saying, "I need you to text me back immediately," is a strategy. It limits options and might feel controlling. But saying, "I feel disconnected when I don't hear from you all day because I need reassurance," shifts the conversation. Now the other person can help meet your need without feeling forced into a specific action. So the next time you're upset, stop. Ask yourself, am I fighting over a strategy, or have I actually expressed my real need? Because when you get clear on what truly matters, you stop arguing about the small things and start solving the real ones. Have you ever asked someone to do something and instead of cooperating, they pushed back? Maybe your partner snapped, your coworker got defensive, or your friend suddenly seemed distant, and you thought, what's their problem? I just asked for something simple. But did you ask, or did you demand? This is where most of us go wrong. We think we're making requests, but in reality, we're issuing ultimatums. And the difference between the two? Choice. A request invites, a demand coerces. A request allows freedom. A demand carries consequences, spoken or unspoken. And here's the paradox. The more you try to control someone, the less willing they are to listen. Let's look at an example. Imagine a manager saying, "I need that report by the end of the day." On the surface, it seems like a request, but there's no flexibility, no room for discussion. It's a demand. Now imagine they say, "Would you be able to finish the report by the end of the day, or do you need any support?" That's a request. The key difference, it acknowledges the other person's autonomy and invites collaboration. But here's the tricky part. Even when we think we're making requests, our tone and expectations can turn them into demands. Let's say a wife tells her husband, "I'd really love for us to spend more time together." If he says no, how does she react? If she's hurt, disappointed, or wants to talk about it, that's fine. But if she gets angry, withdraws, or guilt trips him, was it really a request, or was it a demand disguised as one? True requests are free of punishment. They don't manipulate with shame or obligation. Instead, they invite the other person to meet a need in a way that feels mutually good. Now let's put this into a real-world scenario. Imagine you ask a friend, "Hey, can you help me move this weekend?" If they hesitate, and you immediately say, "Wow, I guess I know where we stand," that's not a request. That's emotional blackmail. But if you say, "I totally understand if you're busy, I just wanted to check," you're actually giving them the choice. And when people feel they can say no, they're more likely to say yes. So how do you make a real request? Make it specific. Instead of "be more supportive," say, "Would you be open to checking in with me after my meetings?" Allow for a no. A true request isn't about getting what you want. It's about creating space for real willingness. Stay open to alternatives. If they can't say yes to how you asked, is there another way to meet the same need? Because here's the truth. You don't want compliance. You want connection. And when people feel free to say no, their yes actually means something. Most people don't listen. They wait. They wait for their turn to speak. They wait for the moment to correct, to argue, to insert their opinion. And while they wait, they're not actually hearing a word you're saying. This is why so many conversations feel unsatisfying. Because real listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about understanding the person behind them. And that's what makes empathetic listening so powerful. Let's do a quick test. Imagine someone says to you, "I'm so stressed out at work." What's your first instinct? Most people respond in one of four ways. Fixing. Have you tried organizing your tasks better? Relating. Yeah, my job is super stressful too. Minimizing. It's not that bad, just take a break. Judging. Well, maybe if you didn't procrastinate so much. Do you notice the problem? None of these responses acknowledge the other person's feelings. Instead, they shift the focus to solutions, to yourself, or to dismissing the emotion entirely. And while you might think you're being helpful, what the other person actually hears is you're not really listening. So what does empathetic listening sound like? It's simple. Reflect back the person's emotions and needs without inserting your own agenda. Let's go back to the example. Them. I'm so stressed out at work. It sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed right now. Is it the workload or something else? No fixing, no judging, no one-upping, just holding space for them to be heard. And here's the incredible thing. When people feel heard, they naturally find their own solutions. They don't need advice, they need to feel understood. Now let's look at a real-world example. Imagine a parent talking to their teenager. "Teen, I hate school." Typical response, "You have to go to school, it's important for your future." Empathetic response, "Sounds like you're really frustrated. What's been making it so hard lately?" See the difference? One shuts down the conversation, the other invites it to continue. This is why empathetic listening is so rare. It requires letting go of control. It means resisting the urge to correct, advise, or fix. It means being okay with silence. It means understanding that people don't always need a solution. They need to know they're not alone. And here's the paradox. The more you truly listen, the more people open up. The less you try to control the conversation, the more meaningful it becomes. So the next time someone shares something with you, pause. Don't rush to respond. Instead, ask yourself, am I actually hearing them, or am I just waiting to talk? Because when you master empathetic listening, you don't just change conversations, you change relationships. Knowing the principles of nonviolent communication is one thing. Applying them, especially in the heat of the moment, is something else entirely. Because let's be real, when someone snaps at you, when your boss is being unfair, when your partner is distant, or when your kid is throwing a tantrum, the last thing on your mind is, how do I structure a nonviolent response? But this is where the magic of nonviolent communication happens. Not in theory, but in practice. When you start applying it, your conversations shift. Your conflicts become opportunities. Your relationships, personal and professional, take on a whole new level of depth and understanding. So let's walk through exactly how to use nonviolent communication in real-life situations, at home, at work, and in conflict resolution. Let's start with the hardest part. Before you respond to someone, check in with yourself. What are you feeling? What need is driving your reaction? For example, let's say you send an important message and hours go by with no reply. Instantly, frustration rises. Maybe thoughts like, they don't respect me or they're ignoring me flood your mind. But before you react, pause. What's the real feeling here? Maybe it's not just anger, it's anxiety because you need clarity. Or maybe it's insecurity because you need reassurance. Once you identify the true need, you can express it more effectively. Instead of saying, "Why are you ignoring me?" which triggers defensiveness, you can say, "I feel a little anxious when I don't get a response because I need clarity. Can you let me know when you have time?" By understanding your own emotions first, you respond instead of reacting, which changes everything. Relationships thrive or die based on communication, and the fastest way to destroy connection? Blame and criticism. Let's say a couple is arguing because one person feels like they're doing all the housework. The instinctive response? Criticism. "You never help out. I have to do everything myself." Now, how does that land? Defensively. The other person might retaliate or shut down. But if we use nonviolent communication, observation, I notice that I've been doing most of the cleaning this week. Feeling, I feel overwhelmed and exhausted. Need, I really need more balance and teamwork. Request, would you be willing to split the chores with me? The same issue is addressed, but instead of an attack, it's an invitation to collaborate. And that changes the entire tone of the conversation. Workplace communication is tricky. You're dealing with different personalities, power dynamics, and often unspoken tensions. But using nonviolent communication can make you a stronger communicator, leader, and negotiator. Let's say your manager constantly gives you last-minute tasks and you're feeling burned out. A typical response might be, "I can't keep doing this. You always dump work on me at the last second." That's frustration talking, but it won't get you what you want. Instead, try a nonviolent communication approach. Observation. I notice that I've been receiving urgent tasks late in the day. Feeling, I feel really overwhelmed when that happens. Need, I need better time management so I can do my best work. Request, would you be open to giving me assignments earlier so I can plan ahead? See the shift? Instead of complaining, you're communicating a clear need in a way that encourages cooperation. Most arguments happen because people feel unheard, but if you know how to listen and reframe the conversation, you can de-escalate tension and build solutions instead of resentment. Imagine a heated argument between two coworkers. Person A, "You never consider my input in meetings." Person B, "That's not true. You just never speak up." Classic defensiveness. But now, let's introduce nonviolent communication into the mix. Instead of reacting, person B pauses and listens empathetically. Are you feeling frustrated because you want more collaboration? Now person A feels heard. The energy shifts. The conversation goes from a fight to a real discussion about working together better. When you listen to the need behind the anger, you stop fighting the symptoms and start addressing the root issue. Kids don't throw tantrums for no reason. They have needs but lack the language to express them, so they scream, cry, or shut down. Typical parental response: stop whining. Go to your room. If you don't stop crying, I'm taking away your toy. But what if, instead, you tuned into the need behind the behavior? Observation. You seem really upset right now. Feeling. Are you feeling frustrated because you wanted to keep playing? Need. You need more time to transition before we leave? Request. Would you like a 5-minute warning next time? When children feel understood, they calm down faster and learn to express themselves better over time. Applying nonviolent communication takes practice. You won't get it right every time. You'll catch yourself slipping into judgments, reacting emotionally, or making demands instead of requests. And that's okay. The key is awareness. The more you pause and ask yourself, am I observing or judging? Am I expressing a feeling or making an assumption? Am I communicating my need clearly? Am I making a request or a demand? The more natural this way of speaking becomes, and the better your relationships get. Not because you're controlling others, but because you're inviting better conversations, deeper understanding, and true connection. Because in the end, communication isn't just about words. It's about whether those words bring people closer or push them further away.